Clint Eastwood's Westerns. 12 films that built his legend. Clint Eastwood, the cowboy hat pulled low, the steel-eyed squint, and the way he could say more in silence than most actors could in a 10-page monologue. He wasn't just another Hollywood leading man. He became the symbol of the American West, even when the West was being filmed in Spain, under a burning European sun. But here's the question that keeps sparking debates among movie buffs, film historians, and die-hard fans. Just how many Westerns did Clint Eastwood really make? Some will tell you 12, the definitive list, the big screen starring roles that cemented his reputation. Others argue it's really 15, if you count those early blink-and-you'll-miss-it appearances and roles where Eastwood wasn't the star yet but still wore a cowboy hat. And then there's Rawhide, the TV show that gave him his first taste of the saddle, which ran for over 200 episodes.
Riding hard, riding fast, always on the go.
Does that count? In this video, we're not just giving you a number. We're walking through each of Clint's 12 iconic Westerns, one by one, showing how they built his legend, and along the way, we'll reveal the 3 hidden Western roles that make the true count so controversial. So saddle up, because this isn't just a filmography, it's the story of how one man became the face of an entire genre. The story begins not in Hollywood, but in Europe. When Clint Eastwood left Rawhide, he wasn't exactly a superstar. In fact, he was looking for something, anything to break him out of the TV cowboy mold. Then came an offer from a little-known Italian director named Sergio Leone. The budget was low, the script was thin, and the production looked like a gamble. The film was called A Fistful of Dollars. It was technically a remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo, but transplanted from samurai Japan to the Wild West. Here's what made it revolutionary. Clint's character didn't even have a name. He was just the man with no name, a drifter, a mercenary, someone who looked out for himself first and spoke only when it mattered. This wasn't the clean-cut, white-hat hero Hollywood audiences were used to. Eastwood's cowboy smoked cigars, double-crossed villains, and didn't mind if his hands got dirty. He was cool, detached, and dangerous, and audiences loved it.
Baxter's over there. Rojo's there.
At first, Hollywood didn't know what to do with the film. It was released in Italy in 1964, but didn't hit American theaters until 1967. By then, word had spread, and Eastwood suddenly wasn't just a TV actor anymore. He was a movie star. With one film, Eastwood flipped the Western genre on its head, but Leone wasn't done with him yet. If A Fistful of Dollars introduced the world to Clint Eastwood's cold, calculating gunslinger, for a few dollars more showed that he could share the screen and still dominate it. This time, he wasn't alone.
Indio's no idiot. When you ride up to him again and show him that little nick you got, he might believe you.
Veteran actor Lee Van Cleef joined him as a rival bounty hunter, and together they created one of the greatest double acts in Western history. The plot was simple. 2 men hunting the same outlaw, but with very different methods. Eastwood's character was calm and calculating, while Van Cleef's was methodical, with a personal vendetta driving him forward. What set this film apart was the way Leone expanded his style. The close-ups were tighter, the gunfights more suspenseful, and the music, by Ennio Morricone, became just as important as the bullets. And Clint, he leaned even harder into the stoic, cigar-chomping loner. You could see the confidence building. He wasn't just playing a role, he was defining a new type of Western hero. But the real explosion came with the 3rd film, the one that would cement Eastwood's cowboy persona forever. This wasn't just a movie, this was cinema history. The good, the bad, and the ugly took everything Leone and Eastwood had been building and turned it into an epic. The runtime stretched past 2.5 hours. The stakes weren't just about bounty hunting anymore. They were about survival, greed, and the chaos of the Civil War. Eastwood returned as the man with no name, this time going up against Lee Van Cleef again, now playing the bad, and Eli Wallach as the ugly. Tuco, a character so unpredictable, he nearly stole the whole film. And yet, Clint's icy cool never wavered. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to move fast. He owned every frame just by existing in it. Then there's the music. Ennio Morricone's score became instantly iconic, with that haunting wah-wah-wah theme that even people who've never seen the film can recognize. The final showdown, the 3-way duel in the cemetery, is often called the greatest Western scene ever filmed. It's slow, it's tense, it's all about the eyes and the hands, until the gunfire explodes. After this, there was no doubt. Clint Eastwood wasn't just a star of westerns, he was the Western. But after conquering Europe, Clint had to bring it all back home, and his first Hollywood Western after the Dollars trilogy would test whether American audiences were ready for this new kind of cowboy. When Clint Eastwood finally returned from Italy, Hollywood didn't know what to expect. He had become a global star overseas, but could he bring that same dark, dangerous energy to American screens? The answer came with Hang 'em High. On paper, it looked like a standard revenge story. A man is wrongly accused of cattle rustling, nearly lynched by a mob, and then returns to hunt them down.
You're under arrest, Reno. When you hang a man, you better look at him.
But behind the scenes, this movie was more than just a Western. It was Eastwood's test of power. He was no longer just the actor for hire. For the first time, Clint was calling the shots. He founded his own production company, Malpaso, and Hang 'em High was its very first project. This wasn't just a role, it was a statement. Clint Eastwood wasn't going to let Hollywood control him ever again. But here's the scandal few people talk about. Critics weren't sure what to make of it. Some saw it as too grim, too violent, almost a hangman's fantasy. Others whispered that Clint was simply recycling his man-with-no-name persona, without adding anything new. For a moment, it looked like his Hollywood comeback might stumble before it even began. And yet the audience didn't care about the critics. They showed up in droves. The film made money, and Clint proved he could dominate the box office on his own turf. But his next move shocked everyone. Because instead of another gritty revenge tale, Clint signed on to a Western musical. Yes, you heard that right. It sounds like a joke today, but it really happened. Clint Eastwood, the man of few words, the silent killer of the desert, was suddenly singing.
Her heart was made of holidays. Her smile was made of dawn.
Paint Your Wagon was Hollywood, at its strangest, a big-budget musical set during the Gold Rush, starring Eastwood, alongside Lee Marvin and Gene Seberg. For some fans, it was the most bizarre detour of his entire career. The scandal, Clint couldn't sing. He admitted it himself. Watching him croon I Talk to the Trees became one of the strangest moments in movie history. Audiences didn't know whether to laugh or cringe. And here's the darker truth. The production was a mess. The budget ballooned out of control. There were rumors of drunken fights on set. Lee Marvin allegedly drank so much during filming that whole days of shooting were wasted. Eastwood, the perfectionist, hated the chaos. When the film finally came out, it did okay financially, but critics savaged it. To this day, Paint Your Wagon sits like a bizarre scar in Clint's Western legacy. Fans still ask, why did he do it? The answer might be simple: money, contracts, or Hollywood pressure. But others believe Clint wanted to prove he could step outside the gunslinger role. Either way, it became the Western nobody talks about, except to laugh.
Talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me.
After that humiliation, Clint needed to get back to form, and he found his comeback in the unlikeliest partner, a nun with a secret. This wasn't your typical Western love story. Clint Eastwood teamed up with Shirley MacLaine in Two Mules for Sister Sara, a film that starts as a buddy comedy and turns into something much stranger.
That information puts gold right in my pocket. This calls for a drink.
Clint plays Hogan, a mercenary drifting through Mexico. When he stumbles across a nun being attacked, naturally, he saves her. But here's the twist. Sister Sara isn't what she seems. She drinks, smokes, swears, and eventually reveals she's no nun at all. The scandal, both on screen and off, came from the sexual tension between Eastwood and MacLaine. Hollywood insiders whispered that the casting was controversial. MacLaine was a powerful personality, not the type to fade into the background, and Clint was used to being the undisputed star. Rumors flew that the two clashed on set, though both downplayed it in interviews. Then there's the opening sequence, one of the darkest in Eastwood's filmography. The attempted assault on Sister Sara shocked audiences and cemented Clint's reputation for starring in films that pushed the boundaries of what a Western could show. At the box office, it worked. The film made money, and fans saw Clint back in his natural role, the cynical gunslinger with a reluctant heart. But his next Western would push him into political territory, with whispers that the film was more about real-world debates than shootouts. At first glance, Joe Kidd looks like another straightforward Western. Clint plays a former bounty hunter hired to stop a band of Mexican revolutionaries. Guns, horses, explosions, the usual ingredients. But beneath the surface, the film carried a layer of controversy. Some critics saw it as Clint's most political Western, touching on issues of land rights, exploitation, and the treatment of Mexican communities in the American Southwest. Depending on who you asked, it was either progressive or reactionary. Behind the scenes, Clint wasn't thrilled with the script. It was written by Elmore Leonard, the crime novelist known for razor-sharp dialogue.
When Mr. Harm doesn't want me around anymore, you let me know, huh, boy?
But reports suggest Eastwood clashed with the production team. He felt the story was muddled, the character underdeveloped. The scandal came later, when fans began accusing the film of whitewashing history. Was Clint playing the hero, or was his character complicit in injustice? Even today, Joe Kidd divides audiences. Some see it as underrated, others as one of Clint's weakest. But one thing's certain, by this point, Eastwood wasn't just an actor in westerns. He was a cultural flashpoint. His films weren't just entertainment, they were debates. And with his next western, Clint took complete control, stepping behind the camera to direct his own vision of frontier justice. And that's when things got truly eerie. Clint Eastwood had conquered Europe, broken through in Hollywood, and survived the embarrassment of Paint Your Wagon. Now, he wanted more than just starring roles. He wanted control. With High Plains Drifter, Clint stepped behind the camera as director, and the result was one of the strangest, most haunting westerns ever made. On the surface, it looks like a typical revenge story. A mysterious drifter rides into a corrupt mining town, exposes the cowardice of its citizens, and unleashes brutal justice. But look closer, and you'll see why fans and critics still argue about this film 50 years later. The scandal? Many believe High Plains Drifter isn't just a western, it's a ghost story. Eastwood's character is never named, never explained. Some say he's the avenging spirit of a murdered marshal, returned from the dead to punish the guilty. Others think he's a demon, a figure of pure vengeance. The violence shocked audiences. The opening scene where Clint's drifter assaults a woman created instant controversy. Was it meant to show his darkness, or was it gratuitous? Even Eastwood's fans were divided. Some called it bold, others called it disturbing. Then there's the ending, with the cryptic tombstone, and the suggestion that Clint's character might not even be human. To this day, nobody agrees on what he really was. What's certain is this: High Plains Drifter wasn't just Clint Eastwood making a western. It was Clint Eastwood announcing that he could reinvent the western entirely, darker, stranger, and more supernatural than anyone had dared before. But his next western wouldn't just stir debate, it would almost tear his career apart. If High Plains Drifter was Clint's experiment in ghostly vengeance, the Outlaw Josey Wales was his attempt at myth-making. And yet the film's behind-the-scenes story is as dramatic as anything that happened on screen. Based on a novel by Forrest Carter, the film tells the story of a Missouri farmer turned Confederate guerrilla who refuses to surrender after the Civil War. He becomes an outlaw, hunted by Union soldiers and bounty hunters alike, while gathering a ragtag group of survivors around him. The controversy started before the cameras even rolled. Clint originally hired director Philip Kaufman to lead the project, but as filming began, Clint grew frustrated with Kaufman's slow pace and artistic choices. In a stunning move, Eastwood had him fired and took over as director himself. This caused an uproar in Hollywood. The Directors Guild of America was furious, seeing it as a violation of creative control. They even created a new rule, known as the Eastwood Rule, to stop actors from firing directors and replacing them mid-production. Clint's power play literally changed Hollywood law. And then there's the politics. The Outlaw Josey Wales was accused of glorifying Confederate resistance. Some saw it as dangerously sympathetic to the Lost Cause myth. Others praised it as a story of survival, community, and redemption. The debate rages to this day. Despite the controversy, the film became one of Eastwood's most beloved westerns. His performance as Josey, the grieving husband turned reluctant leader, showed a depth and vulnerability audiences hadn't seen before. It wasn't just about vengeance, it was about building something new out of destruction. But after all the blood and controversy, Clint went quiet. For nearly a decade, he didn't make another traditional western. When he finally returned, he did so with a film that blurred the line between savior and specter. By the mid-1980s, westerns were fading. The genre that had once dominated Hollywood was nearly extinct. Studios weren't interested. Audiences had moved on, and the cowboy hero seemed like a relic of the past. But Clint Eastwood wasn't finished. In 1985, he released Pale Rider, a film that revived the Western for a new generation, and once again, he wrapped it in mystery. The story begins with a mining town under siege by a ruthless tycoon. The townsfolk are helpless until a mysterious preacher rides in. Dressed in black, with a calm voice and a deadly aim, he becomes their protector. But who is he really? That's the scandalous heart of Pale Rider. Is the preacher just a man with a gun and a mission? Or is he something supernatural? A ghost, an angel, or even death himself? The title, of course, comes from the Book of Revelation. And behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. Fans debated endlessly. Some swore he was the avenging spirit of a murdered lawman. Others believed he was divine judgment made flesh. Clint, as always, refused to explain, letting the mystery fuel the legend. The film became the highest-grossing Western of the decade, proving that the genre wasn't dead, not as long as Eastwood had something to say. But here's the eerie part. Pale Rider felt like Clint preparing for his own farewell. A ghostly figure, riding into town, saving the helpless, then vanishing into the horizon. It was as if Eastwood himself knew the end of his Western road was near. And he was right, because when Clint finally returned to the saddle one last time, it wasn't to glorify the cowboy myth, but to destroy it. Before we get to Clint's grand farewell to the Western, there's one film that often gets overlooked, Bronco Billy. At first glance, it's not even a true Western. There are no dusty ghost towns, no bounty hunters, no showdowns at high noon. Instead, it's about a modern-day traveling Wild West show, run by a ragtag group of misfits, with Clint playing Bronco Billy, the so-called fastest gun in the West.
Hey, aren't you Bronco Billy, the fastest in the West? I could outdraw you any day in the week. Bronco Billy.
But here's the twist. Bronco Billy is a fraud. He's not a legendary cowboy. He's just a man clinging to a fading dream, keeping the myth alive for audiences who no longer believe in it. Some fans laughed it off as Clint's clown cowboy movie. Others saw it as something darker. Clint Eastwood taking a hard look at his own career. Was he admitting that the Western hero was a dying act? That even he, the man who defined the gunslinger, was becoming obsolete? Behind the scenes, there was tension too. Critics didn't know what to make of the film, calling it sentimental, even silly. Clint defended it fiercely, insisting it was one of his personal favorites. He later called Bronco Billy, maybe the closest I've ever come to playing myself. The scandal? Hollywood insiders whispered that Clint was showing cracks, that the tough guy of Dirty Harry and Leone's westerns had grown soft, hiding behind a circus act. The film didn't tank, but it didn't light up the box office either. Still, Bronco Billy lingers like a quiet confession. It wasn't about gunfights, it was about the cost of pretending to be a legend. And maybe that's why, when Clint saddled up one last time for a Western, he didn't play a hero at all. He played a killer, haunted by his own myth. If Eastwood's Western career was a journey, Unforgiven was the destination, the final word. By the early 90s, the Western was all but dead. Nobody wanted them anymore. But Clint came back with a story that wasn't about glorifying the cowboy. It was about tearing the myth apart. He played William Money, a former outlaw and killer, who had long since retired to a miserable life as a failing pig farmer. When he's tempted back into one last job, the old violence resurfaces, but this time, there's nothing glamorous about it. The scandal wasn't just the violence. It was the way the film destroyed the very image Clint had built for decades. His character wasn't a noble gunslinger or a mysterious savior. He was a broken man, drunk, haunted, stumbling through mud and blood. And when the killing finally comes, it isn't clean, it isn't stylish, it's ugly, terrifying, and brutal. Clint himself said the film was meant as an anti-Western, a rejection of the myths he had once embodied. The gamble paid off. Unforgiven won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Eastwood. More importantly, it cemented his legacy. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore. He was a filmmaker with the courage to bury the cowboy myth once and for all. When Clint rides off at the end of Unforgiven, disappearing into the rain, it feels like the closing of a book. The West is over, the legend is over, and the man who carried it for 3 decades walks away. But if the story ended there, we'd miss one last piece of the puzzle. The 3 forgotten Westerns that still haunt Clint Eastwood's filmography. So there you have it, 12 starring Westerns that made Clint Eastwood a legend. From The Man with No Name to William Money, he carried the Western on his back for nearly 30 years. But remember that number we mentioned at the start? The whispers that some fans say it wasn't 12, but 15? Let's talk about those missing 3. Star in the Dust, 1956. A young, uncredited Eastwood plays a ranch hand. He barely gets a moment of screen time, but technically, yes, it's a Western. Some hardcore fans count it, others dismiss it as trivia. Ambush at Cimarron Pass, 1958. A cheap B-movie where Eastwood plays a supporting role. He later called it the worst film ever made, but it's still a Western, and technically, it's still part of his filmography. Rawhide, 1959-65. Not a movie, but a TV series, and one that ran for over 200 episodes. For many viewers, this was their first glimpse of Clint Eastwood as a cowboy. But does television count? That's where the debate heats up. So what's the real number? Is Clint Eastwood's Western legacy 12 masterpieces, or 15 if you count every cameo and TV role? Maybe that's the beauty of it. Clint himself never gave a straight answer. He let the mystery ride on, just like his nameless drifters. And maybe that's the final truth. Clint Eastwood wasn't just an actor in Westerns. He was the Western, a man of few words, many myths, and a legacy so big that even the numbers can't quite contain it. So what do you think? Should we only count the 12 films where Clint Eastwood was the star? Or do the hidden ones matter too? Drop your number in the comments. 12, 15, or maybe even more. That was just one glimpse into Golden Hollywood. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next hidden story.